Take your CJ7 all the way to 11. Jeepin' with Cool Guy.
Today, in Cool Guy's garage, we're going to put the clutch back together. As you can see, I've already gone a little bit ahead of the game, just because I needed to figure out how to do this. Funny thing is I had to actually go back and watch one of my own videos to remember how I did this, or took it off. So, flywheel. Nice, big, and super heavy. It doesn't just bolt on, you just put this thing on here. These bolts, are actually in a certain configuration that bolt into the crankshaft. So you have to hold the flywheel up and align the bolt holes to that because they're not symmetrical, which took me about 10 minutes to figure out. I was thinking I had a defective part, but no, it was nice and simple. You need to torque these to 105 foot-pounds. That's kind of a challenge because that's a lot of weight. So what you could do, or what I did, is take a couple bolts that are the same size. I think these are 3/8 maybe. Yeah. And screw them into the actual clutch plate holes. And then what that gives you is a point where you could put a bar through, put this through here like this, and leverage that out, and then you can use your torque wrench, set it to spec, and just push against that. So when you do this, you want to make sure you get these in here threaded well enough and deep enough, and also you also want to make sure you use a pipe that's strong enough to be able to hold this. 105, otherwise you're going to have somebody hold the wheel for you, and that is not easy to do. So if you're doing this by yourself, easy way to do it. Now, let's move on to the clutch plate. One thing to note, actually a couple things to note. First thing to note is inside here, this is your pilot bushing. It looks like a piece of brass. You want to inspect that to make sure it's not grooved, cracked, or any excessive wear. But I was looking inside of it, trying to figure out what was going on, because there was like a little bit of oil there. And inside there's this little piece of foam. It's called the bushing wick. And you need to pull that out and resaturate it with oil. When you replace, if you are going to replace your pilot bushing, which I'm not going to because it's in perfectly fine shape, you will need to hopefully get a wick with that. So anyways, just something to note. Thought that was kind of interesting. So you just saturate in unused motor oil and just stick it back in there. I guess it provides lubrication for the actual the pilot bushing. Now, next thing you need to do is to take your actual clutch, or not your clutch plate, but the driven plate, as they call this. At least the manual calls it the driven plate. Hopefully somewhere on this plate it tells you what side is supposed to go to the flywheel. And I've got little type in here that says flywheel side. So I'm like, oh, that's really nice. So you take this, you put it on your flywheel. There are little tapered pieces, or tapered flaps that fit on the inside of the flywheel. As you can tell, not very well. Then you take your alignment tool. You align it and you push that right through, and it holds right in to the actual flywheel. Then you take your nice light clutch plate, put that over the top, and align it with the bolt holes. Keeping the original bolts, I just heat treated these things. I thought they were a cool shape. So align these up with the respective holes. I would suggest starting with the top, so you can take your hand off of this thing, relax for a minute. They are 1/2 inch, by the way, which you might have learned if, well, no, actually I didn't show this in the other video, which I'm actually kind of disappointed that I didn't do, because this made it a lot more difficult to figure this all out. Okay, so as long as we've got that alignment tool in there, and it's pushing against, and your clutch plate is pressing against your driven plate, which is holding it in alignment, then you should be in good shape, because you definitely don't want these things to be out of center. If they're out of center, then you're in trouble. Torque specs on these things are 23 foot-pounds. When you are applying or putting your clutch cover back on, hand tighten these things in. Just finger tighten them, because the last thing you want to do is you want to over tighten one, and you actually wind up bending your clutch plate, and you don't want to do that. So once you get it to the point where it's finger tight, very much like you put on a wheel, go in a counterclockwise rotation and go all the way around your plate and rotate it once or twice until you get all these things into a tightened position, and then you can torque them up, because you don't want to bend the plate frame. That's bad news. Alright, now that we got all of our bolts torqued up to the 23 spec, you can pull out your alignment pin. Let's move on to the bell housing. Well, here's our bell housing, or clutch cover, whatever you want to call it. If you watched my last video, or the video when I took this off, it's in a lot worse shape, powder coated it. It was aluminum, not worried about it rusting out, but I thought it'd be nice to kind of protect it to leave it even more, just from tarnish and so on. Replaced pretty much everything in here. Powder coated the throwout arm, the bearing arm, new gasket. This is kind of a pain in the butt to get in here. Pushing this through this little tiny hole. Use some soap, just some dish soap, and wedge your way through it. But really what I wanted to call out were two things. Underneath here there is a ball. It's a big ball bearing, about that big, and it's actually what this thing pivots on. So it uses that spring as that release action. And then the other part of that is the actual spring that holds the arm in place. Pain in the butt to get in. So you put it through here, and there's the ends of the springs are different. The one that actually goes in the top part of the bell housing in here is straight and then curved. The one that actually goes into the arm itself goes at about a 30-degree angle and then bends over, so that it can reach back inside of this actual arm. When you actually get into the details of this and pull this spring out, you'll see what I'm talking about. But I just want to make sure that you are aware of that. But this is our bell housing assembly. All nice and shiny and powder coated. Just put in the throwout bearing on the arm. Very simple. Really, there's only one way that can go in. But it just latches right on. I've already greased it all up. Got grease oozing out all over the place. So we're good to go. Let's put this sucker on the actual engine block. Checking into the specs, it says that the top bolts, I think it's the ones up here, are 35, and the ones that are actually have nuts on them and the ones down below are 45. But I will check that before we do this and specify each one as we go. Alright, when you're putting your bell housing on, clutch cover, whatever you want to call it, make sure that you align these pilot dowels, wherever you call it, tube with the appropriate hole on your bell housing, because you don't want to be pushing into your aluminum any more than you already are going to be doing and causing damage. So once you get that aligned, now that'll be a little awkward just because I got it powder coated. Start with your top bolt. This is the shortest one of all of them. And I think I've got these configured right, but I'm not 100% sure. So we'll see. Then I think you just move around the outside. In the set of bolts that you have with your bell crank or your bell housing, there are two of them. I think they're 3 inches, maybe 2.5. They are much larger. I think they're like ½ inch as opposed to the 3/8 that the other ones are. So they're really not hard to mix up. But these two longer, bigger bolts are definitely the ones that go into the actual dowel tubes that the bell housing fits over the top of. These should be 45 foot-pounds, and the rest of these should be 35. By the way, these are 9/16, and the bigger ones are 5/8. These last two are the ones that go all the way through and actually bolt in from the back side. So these things need to be 35 foot-pounds. Well, my problem with that is that they actually wind up gouging into the aluminum. So I'm going to put a washer on the back of these things and also use a lock nut for this. Maybe a little overkill, but I'd rather do that than wind up gouging the aluminum some more. £35. Alright, I'm going to torque this one up, and then we're done. You now have installed your bell housing, your throwout bearing, your clutch plate, your flywheel, and your driven plate. Wow. I think it looks really good. I kind of like the chrome silver with the black or the stainless steel. I think it's a cool look.